The Tamer is a trainer class that is specific to Kanto. It only appears in Kanto games. Because of the way the sprite is positioned, I always thought that the Tamer had like a blanket roll or a log or something on his back, and it wasn't until Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that I realized that actually Tamers are holding lollipops. As for in-game teams for Red, Blue, and Yellow, Tamers have some pretty cool Pokemon in their lineup, especially when you consider the transition to the TCG, where all of these Pokemon are severely underplayed and underappreciated. I was very tempted to include Arbok in the Tamer deck, but Arbok is going to be appearing in another theme deck that I've already got built, but the Tamer still has lots more to offer in terms of cool Pokemon cards that don't normally see play. I gotta say, this is probably my favorite trainer class that I play tested around with for this little mini format, because it uses two of my favorite Pokemon to use in Pokemon Stadium. So let's have a look. Starting with my favorite Pokemon to use in Stadium, and that is Tauros. Such a well-rounded monster with a great move pool, and it fares pretty well in the TCG. It doesn't get that 70 HP that most big basics got, but it can utilize double colorless, and it's got a resistance to Psychic, so it gives it a great matchup against the Juggler deck that we just did. For whatever reason, Tauros was always my go-to filler card as a kid whenever I would be deck building. If I needed a couple more Pokemon to round out a deck, I'd just put Tauros in there. Full playset of Tauros, because it is such a great Pokemon to start a match with. You can just drop a double colorless on it and start attacking with Stomp. And then we'll be doing a 3/3 line of Sandslash, another card that can utilize double colorless, but you don't want to be dropping those DCEs on Sandslash. You want to be saving those for your normal type counterparts in this deck. Sandslash is going to be there to use the fighting energy in this deck and provide some coverage against other opposing normal type Pokemon. But it can potentially attack for some pretty high damage on turn 2 if you do start the game with a Sandshrew. Just evolve it up, drop another energy, start using those Fury Swipes. To round out the Pokemon, we'll be running a 3/3 line of Persian, another Pokemon that I love using in Stadium because it is so gimmicky. In Gen 1, your critical hit ratio was based on speed, and Persian was a pretty fast Pokemon, and it got Slash, and so just crit Slash everywhere. And it also got Bubble Beam for if you ran into those high defense rock Pokemon that Slash wouldn't be as effective with. You just hit them with a Bubble Beam. Great gimmicky Stadium Pokemon. And a decent Pokemon card. I'm not going to act like this Persian is great. It's maybe one of the worst normal type Pokemon in base Fossil, but it's got free retreat and you can use double colorless, so you can kind of hit and run with it when you need to, which is pretty helpful if you need to use Switch on a Tauros that has confused itself, and then you just use Persian's free retreat to go right back to the bench. Get rid of that special condition on Tauros so that it can use its Rampage attack again without having to worry about the confusion. Got your standard Bill and Oak with a couple copies of Computer Search to just search out those evolution cards when you can't quite draw them with the Bills and the Oaks. And then Pokemon Trader, because there are technically two evolution lines in this deck, but if there's something in your hand that you don't quite need, exchange it for something else in your deck that you can use. Fuji is a card that I find works really well with Pokemon that utilize double colorless energy, because if they get knocked out, double colorless isn't coming back from your discard pile. But if you can get that Pokemon back onto your bench and then use Mr. Fuji, it's not Gust Bait anymore, and that double colorless is going right back into your deck where you can search it back out with a Computer Search or try to draw it with Bill. Like I mentioned earlier, Switch is mainly in here to help get rid of the confusion on Tauros when it's attacking with its Rampage attack. As Persian has free retreat, Sandslash can retreat for only one energy, so you don't really need a full playset of Switch in here to utilize that strategy, just a couple of them. There's 3 copies of Item Finder in this deck so that you can reuse Switch if you need to. More likely than not though, you're going to be using it to reuse Mr. Fuji or Lass, because you don't want your opponent discarding those double colorless energies. Like I said, once they're in the discard, you're not getting them back. They are very crucial to this deck very early game, so that's why you want to use your own energy removals get energy off of your opponent's Pokemon while you're setting up and attacking off of double colorless, and then also play last so that your opponent's not going to be hitting you back next turn with whatever energy removals they have in their hand. And then of course, because this is a base fossil deck and it is very reliant on dealing damage early game just off of a couple of energy, full play set of plus power. That way you're squeezing as much damage out of those attacks as you can, calculating the precise amounts to knock out your opponent in probably 2 or 3 attacks. This deck's not really going to be hitting any Okos, but it is really good for wearing down your opponent and forcing them to retreat to the bench, and then they realize in the middle of the game that they've got 6 Pokemon all within 1 attack of knocking out, and then they have to start making decisions on how they want to attack and try to knock out your Pokemon faster than you can get to theirs. I apologize for the serious slant that this deck has, but I guess I just didn't notice it whenever I was recording the footage. But you got that playset of double colorless in here. That's kind of the focal point of this deck. Ideal start to the game, Tauros and a double colorless energy in hand, preferably with a draw card, a plus power, and maybe a last. And then it will depend on your matchup which Pokemon you want to get onto the field after Tauros, whether it be Sandslash or Persian. Generally, it's going to be Sandslash unless you already have the Meowth and another double colorless energy in hand. You don't want to play the DCEs too early in the game because your opponent will just remove them. If you like the other Pokemon in the Tamer lineup, then put them in there. Stick them in there. Put you a snake and a duck right in the deck. The only problem there is figuring out how your energy balance is going to go with the deck. If you're just running one of these cards with Tauros and or Persian, you don't really have to worry about it because they're colorless. But for Fossil Golduck in particular, half the reason it's good is because Fossil Psyduck is so good. So if you want the full potential out of these cards, you're going to have to run Psychic Energy so you can use Psyduck's Headache, and then also Water Energy so that you can use Golduck's Hyper Beam, which doesn't leave you a lot of room for Grass Energy for Arbok or Fighting Energy for Sandslash. So if you're running Golduck, you're kind of excluding Arbok and Sandslash automatically. Either way you go, you're still going to end up with a pretty cool deck. That's another of the reasons I've really liked deck building in this format, is that Base Fossil is typically built around big basics and big stage 2s. You rarely see any stage 1 Pokemon other than Wigglytuff. And that's the same for any TCG. If you play long enough, you get sick and tired of seeing the same, 5 holo rares that make up every single deck. And that is the Tamer deck. The theme deck train keeps grooving on down the tracks. So stay tuned for more decks like this and just more Pokemon content in general. Social media links in the description. Until next video, bye!